Okay, good morning. We're Hemshech Tzadik Daled, top of page 161. Good. I believe I elaborated yesterday on these two levels of bittul, level 3 and level 2, which exist both in the Oyer and also in the Nivroim, in the Yesh, through its Avodah of contemplating. That's the key difference, because Oyer naturally is bottle. The whole creation, existence of Oyer is Ayin. It does not need to become Ayin. But in Ayin itself, there's the three types of bittul, one deeper and higher than the next. Hedet fisa smokim, lack of standing, it's like the flame, kishraga betira, like the candle in light of the sun. The second type and higher level is that its entire existence is dependent on its source. And without the source, it doesn't exist. And the third, Ein Zuloscha, he called that. And the third, Efes Biltecha, is the Oyer is not only is it dependent on the source, but with the source, you can say it exists, but its entire existence is dependent, but even with the source. Imha Atzmus, he says, it also does not have any mitzias. In other words, you're talking about something that is, you don't see two things even. All it is an expression of Atzmus. That's Efes Biltecha. To explain that, he brought the Shari Yechid V'Amunah. But we have to couple the Shari Yechid V'Amunah with what he said earlier. If you remember in type 2, he also explained that we also can find in Nivroim that second level of bittul, the whole contemplation of Ma Rabu Masecha, Ma Godlu Masecha, Havaya, when you contemplate on the creatures of the earth, the earthly creations, and the heavenly bodies, you also come to understand that their entire existence and perpetuation is dependent on a force outside of them, as we learned in the previous mimer and earlier in Ayin Beis. That's level 2. It exists, existence is there, and it's dependent on its source, especially the permanence, the orbit, the movements, the coordination. If you recall, we learned this at length. But then there's level 3 also in Nivroim, and he brings the Shayach of Vamun, and in Tzadik Dal, he clearly spells it out. In Ayin Beis, it's not so obvious until you learn the Tzadik Dal. Then you see that that's the pshat there too. That you have the first level of bittul and Shayach of Vamunah, that the letters themselves are, the letters of creation, existence itself is completely dependent on the letters, to the point that the true reality is not existence, but the letters. And that's why it's Batal B'Mitzias Mamish, because its entire existence, as he says in Pei Gimel, is the letters, the divine Kayach, the Ruchnius, that gives it energy. And then he brings the next line where it says, V'Ruchnius Hashefeya Alav Tamid. That is Hulavade. Hulavade. This is the only thing that this is, all of existence is simply the Lavade in the language that he uses in Tanya. He says, I'll read it exactly right. Not just bil odei ruchni yazu, but he goes on and says that hu levade hamitzia tomid be'efes v'ayin liyesh u'mahav esei imkein efes bilodei be'emes. So efes bilodei, nothing, absolutely nothing bilodei except him, without him. So this, he says, is the level 3, and Nivroim, you also have that. However, a nivra is different than a oyer. Oyer is mitzius is bittul. So therefore, the question is, how much of the mitzius of the oyer is obvious or not? So on level 2, it's obvious. On level 3, there's no mitzius of oyer. But when it comes to nivraim, he says, tzrichim leimer mashanimtze mitzius hu batel b'mitzius mamish. There, the chiddush is bittul in the first place, because a yesh on its own is not batel on its own, from its perspective. So the chiddush is the bittul of the yesh. The question is the bittul of the yesh one level, which we call level 2 in the oyer, but level 1 in Shayach Vamunah, the bittul is due to the fact that because it doesn't have a bittul mitzias mamish, as he says in Shayach Vamunah, because it's all about the ruach ruchnius that gives it energy, Or is the bittul to the extent that it's all about levade, the Eibishter's power to create? So existence is simply a reflection of God's koyach hamahava, the koyach habriya, the koyach habeira. But in Oyer, he says, it's deeper because the Oyer Lechatchila is not a mitzvah. He says, even though it's a ruchni, it's ayin, leibchinis mitzias, so kol mitzius eo atzmus. On yesh, the key is the yesh was never comes to tell you that it's a Oyer, a ha'ora of atzmus. Yesh actually is a mitzias, yesh hanivra created by atzmus, like Ayin Beis says afterwards, which we'll talk about later. I don't want to talk about right now. We'll go back to it. That the yesh hanivra is that comes straight from Atzmus, the power of Atzmus. The point is not bittul, the point is that it reflects the power of Atzmus. So therefore, what you say is that it's bittul. And by Oyer, kol mitzius Atzmus, because that's what its whole inyan is bittul to elikus. Where the yesh's inyan is not bittul, the bittul comes through avodah. So I'll continue now from line 3 on top of page 161. I'll just add one more thing, which you can add pshat, which is maybe the pshat in the parentheses in Ayin Beis. With the yesh, even when the yesh is bottle, meaning through aveda, l'osed love, with the yesh hanivra will be one with the yesh amiti. The kavanah there is that the yesh hanivra should exist, that there should be a tachtenim, and this tachtenim reflects atzmus in a revealed way. With Oyer, the kavanah was never an Oyer. The kavanah is not Oyer. The Oyer is only an emtsoi in order to create the yesh and to introduce awareness, divine awareness, and bittul. That's why you never say that in the Oyer, hu levade bekeche v'yecholte to create Oyer. Because lo ze ikada atzamus to create Oyer. Oyer is not a reflection of Atma. Oyer is not a reflection of the power of Atma. Oyer's inyan is to reveal. So it's never an inyan that Oyer should be a mitzias la'atzmei, and that mitzias should feel that it's alikus. Its whole inyan is to be a reflection of Atzmus. To the point in this level 3 that kol mitziusei hu Atzmus. In the yesh, the kavanah is not that kol mitziusei hu Atzmus. Kol mitziusei is nivra mina Atzmus. It's created by Atzmus, but you want to have, it's an end in itself, the yesh. It's dira b'tachteim. God wants the yesh, and the yesh is not an intermediary, but the yesh on its own doesn't have bittul. So it needs to create bittul. So you can say that that's why by you say tzrichim lemer bottle mitzias mamish, because that's really what happens. That the yesh is not a separate entity. That's what it has to learn. That it's not a separate entity, and that its whole that its bottle is completely nullified due to the divine energy within it, to the point that all it is God's creation. But it's still a creation. When it comes to the Eir is not an end in itself. The Eir is only an interface. The Ayin Be'emtza that we've been learning, Yesh Amiti, Yesh Anivra, the Ayin Be'emtza is exactly that, an interface to introduce divine awareness and Gili and Bittel into the Yesh, into existence. And it does so as a reflection of Atzmus with all the 3 levels we discussed. I think what I said is a critical point here. That one is the kavana. Kavana sa'atzmus is in yesh, like he says in chapter 36 in Tanya, that the kavana is dafke tachtein, because all the elyenim, which includes Eir, hoyel lehem yiridim Eir panav is barach. They don't have any quality. All there is gili. It's not. It's a yiridik legaba atzmus, because atzmus loiza ikar of atzmus is to create ruchnius or to create the Eir, whereas tachteinim is the kavana itself. So yes, the kavanah is that it should be bottle, but that's the kavanah. It should be in the yesh hanivra, should be the bittul talakus. Eir's kavanah is to introduce bittul, but Eir's inyan is to reveal atzmus, and that's all. To the point, like we said now, that kol mitziusei hu atzmus. So in essence, you could say la'asid love, the yesh hanivra will also recognize that kol mitziusei hu atzmus, but it'll be recognized in the yesh. Whereas an Eir is like an invisible force that its main goal is representing the source, not the creation of the yesh. Eir does so because the Atzmus wants the yesh, But Eir's Inyan is like an invisible interface. And when the Yesh completely feels Atzmus, Eir is there behind the scenes because Eir is the one that carried that bittul and that gili. And gili still, the fact that existence needs gili elikus, so Eir serves that purpose. But it's really, its role is to be an invisible, transparent entity. And the Yesh is not meant to be transparent, it's meant to be an existence. But this existence is now, La'asalavi will be transparent in the sense that it will reflect Atzmus. But it's in a Yesh, not in a Ayin. It's a Yesh and a Oir. Yesh Amiti, Yesh Anivra, in a thing called Mitzias. And that Mitzias itself is Atzmus. So that's the key difference to understand between the two. Okay.
So what is the Yesh? What
Yesh
is
the creation of gods that he wanted a dir b'tachtenim, an existence that that on its own does not feel its source. It feels that is ein le'ila v'siba acheres. It doesn't. The ein le'ila v'siba. It doesn't sense any source. The Yesh. Look in the mirror and you'll see the Yesh. It's about self-contained self. Every human being on earth is a Yesh, and needs work to recognize that truly this Yesh is created by Elokus, like he says in Shaykh Ramuna, level 1. That is the letters of the divine that give you your existence. Number 2, that it's hulavade. What's the word? Hulavade hametzia tamid. That's really the Eibishter's koyach. And even the Helam that creates the Yesh, we learned earlier in Ayin Beis, I pointed out yesterday, is also due to the koyach simtsum, hein gvuresav. This is what we need to work on. So the Yesh is the raw existence as we know it before it recognizes the truth. Before, like he said, before it's megalas ha'emes. The Yesh, he says, ageshemu kiso yala emes. It conceals the emes agomur. It conceals the utter truth. Shayeshu batel b'mitzias. So the Yesh, as opposed to the Eir does not conceal the fact that it's batel. Eir is bittul. The Eir never claims I'm something else. The Yesh can claim that it's something else, and when in truth it's really batel. And the Aveda is to recognize that truth. And when you recognize the truth, you mala the Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu Liyas Leyis Baruch Dir B'Tachtenim Yesh Anivra becomes one with Yesh Amiti. So the Eibishter wanted something that's complete Helam, like he says in Tanya, Tachtenim Behelam Eris Baruch in Perek Lamed Vov, exact lashon. Could I to cite the exact lashon since I have a Tanya here? He says these words. Tachtenim. He says like this: Levushim amastirim evrachayz ad shenivr elam hazer hagashmi v'achumri mamish v'hu hatachtim b'madrege shein tachtim man be'inyan hester eri yizbarach v'cheshach kofel mechupel ad shul moli klippes v'sitrach shein neged Hashem mamish lemer v'ani v'afsi eid. And that's the tachlis hakavana. So if you ever want to know what the yesh is, just look in Perek Lamed Vav. If you want to know how do you achieve bittul hayesh, meaning the kavanah of dir b'tachtenim, there you could also look in Perek Lamed Vav Lamed Zayin. He talks about that too. But in Shaykh V'Amunah, he gives you the dynamics, the mechanics of this bittul. Okay, good.
Are we saying that now? Are we saying now, Bisman Zed, that the Yesh Nivra, particularly the person, can achieve a batel to the Ayin Amiti?
Everybody according to their level. It all depends where you're at. There's no rule. If you do more Avedi, you achieve higher levels. But you could. Potentially, you could do whatever you want if you really apply yourself. You know, there's different levels of people. And how they avoid. Most people reach Bitla Yesh. Can you reach Bitl Metzias? Maybe at times. This is a relative question based on a person's Aveda. It's completely dependent on your Aveda. Obviously, you'll need the Eibishter's help. Ruach Tuma Avim in Haaretz, and the Eibishter shechs the Yetzer Hara La'asad Lave in the second stage after the Mesa Mashiach Tchis HaMesim. So ultimately, like the Alter Rebbe brings on the pasuk of Vasiresi Leva Even and Venasati Lechem Leva Basar, that you'll need Hasiresi. You need the Eibishter to remove the heart of stone. But the Moyechev and Alter Rebbe explains we can achieve. So this is already a question in general, how high a person can reach in this world. There's no question there's going to be a limit, but still, none of us have reached that limit yet. So our job is to do the best we can possibly do with our keiches, and you don't measure one person against another. The question is whether you're going to be like Zusha. Zusha cried, is he like Zusha, not like someone else? Each of us has to work on our level. That's the work here. And remember, this isn't a contest, so it's not about it's about doing the best you can possibly do. When you learn Chassidus is teaching us bittul. So yes, all these levels exist within us, in other words, in some form of microcosm. So for example, if you say yourself, for example, that you have a certain bittul when you're davening in the morning, you say Moida Ani, and then the Brichos HaShacha, and then Hoidu, and the rest of the davening. So technically, Chassidus explains that davening consists of 4 stages. You climb from the lower level of bittul to Shemoneh Esrei, which is the highest level. Avde Kamamadi, you stand. What is standing? Utter bittul, much deeper bittul than when you sit, where you could sit during earlier stages of davening. Do most people reach that? They should be. But do they? Many people, for them, Shemoneh Esrei and Moeda Ani is the same thing. And a lot of people, it's lip service. But in Inyan, these are 4 stages. Everyone can climb. For example, a Yom Kippur, many people have a Seder that's deeper than the rest of the year. So the Fiyarech, relatively speaking, you could say there was a little more bittul in Yom Kippur than there was other days of the year. This is what Chassidus teaches, how to achieve bittul all the time. What we're learning here, of course, are the highest standards of what is the truth. Like he says, emes gomer. Do we reach the emes gomer? I would start with levels that we can attain. And then you climb. It's hard to expect somebody to jump to these highest levels if you haven't gotten used to a little bit on lower levels. You can't run a marathon of 25 miles if you haven't run one for 1 mile. So I would suggest that's how you do it. We're going to talk more about this when we talk about applying it to life. But the answer is everybody according to their level. Yeah.
Okay, still bittul yesh, but you can have bittul yesh to the ayin amiti.
I don't know. By me, it's semantics. Explain to me bittul yesh. For some people, bittul yesh is bittul mimitzias compared to others yesh.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Words are just words. You have to find these levels within yourself. This is all about you. This is not about abstract theory here. You have to look in yourself. I could see some people, Yom Kippur is bittul mitzias compared to their bittul yesh throughout the year. Some people are just achieving bittul yesh. This is not a physical piggy bank where you say, okay, I can carry a weight of 10 pounds. Now I carry 20 pounds, 30 pounds. It's all about a type of the Aveda that a person does. And our focus has to be, where are you at? What are you doing with your life? It's not about conceptual ideas here. Obviously, because Hashem will then intervene as well. And remember, we have the thousands of years of accumulated Aveda that has refined the Yesh. So we're living in a world which is far more refined Yesh than ever before in history. Not due to our personal Aveda, but due to generations of Zichuch that changed the world, including Matan Teda and before that the Ovis, and then the generations afterwards. I don't want to digress. This is really our Aveda in achieving this. So here he's laying out the blueprint of the levels. And then we'll talk about how we apply these levels to our lives.
Okay.
Remember, all this is the ayin of the Yesh Amiti. If you really want to do an Aveda, you have to start with the ayin of the Yesh Hanivra. First, get yourself from a place, from total Chemer Hayesh, to recognizing at least that there's a God that runs your life. Even on the lowest levels. All this is quite high levels, frankly. But we're still learning them. But the point is that, again, it's all about us achieving it. This is all the highest levels of Ayin Amiti. Within that itself, the 3 Afanim. So let's continue now. Now, just a little background here. What I just read now, I'll read now. V'zeu efes biltecha. The 4th line on page 161. And this is efes biltecha. Mamish the lashon from Shayach Damuna. Efes bilode be'emes. Shagam ima atzmus. Also, when atzmus is there, in other words, when the atzmus is not there, so to speak, if atzmus did not radiate, obviously there's no air. But But even with Atzmus, which you could say, yeah, so you could think that there's Oir. He says, Lo yesh rak bechinas Atzmus. All you have is Atzmus, and Oir is an invisible force. It's there, but all it is an expression of Atzmus. V'hu ha'efen ha'gimel b'madreges ha'bitl de'er. And that's the third efen, the third type, in the levels of the nullification, or the sublimation, or the bitl, the selflessness of Oir. The gam bitl zeh hu machmash is due to this bitl also, just like the first two levels, was due to what? Not due to Avodah. It was due to the fact machmash shemitzias Oir hu rak al yedei dveikus ba'atzmus, because the entire existence of Oir is due to its only exists only due to its attachment and connection in Atzmus, ba'atzmus. Al keina bitl ba'er hu she'ena b'chinas mitzias klal. The yesh doesn't have dveikus to Atzmus. The yesh is created dafke in efen of no dveikus. That's why we can walk around this earth and feel like we're completely independent, because there's no dveikus on its own. The truth is, like you said, the emes is that the yesh nivra is also bottled b'mitzias mamish, based on all that we explained from Shayach Vamuna, and there's a tzimtzum and a helam. In Oir, you don't have that. Oir is, kol inyane is dveikus. So therefore, also this third level of bitl is due to its connection to Atzmus. And in this third level, and therefore the selflessness in the Oir, completely transparent. There's no mitzias at all. Its entire existence is only that it's expression of Atzmus. Now, before we continue, this will be the last words from Ayin Beis that Salik Daled will cite. The rest of this mimer all comes to continue to explain this third level of bittul, and this last line is what is after that the Frierdiker Rebbe stopped the hemshech. If you go skip ahead, page 166, you'll see it says Ad kan nimtza mehemshech zeh. Because the Frierdiker Rebbe stopped, didn't finish it. So the rest of the Maimon is coming to explain all this third level of bittul in comparison to the first and second levels. Then we'll go back to Ayin Beis, which the Frierdiker Rebbe did not continue to cite and explain. So this is the last line from Ayin Beis, but still, we still have 2, 4, 6 pages, 5.5 pages of explanation. Okay. So now continues, the Frierdiker Rebbe is explaining this. It says like this. So kol metzias hu ha'atzmus. V'nimtza. And now he sums it up. V'nimtza. So what do we derive from all this? What's the conclusion from all the gimel efane habitl de'er? That the 3 types of bitl of Oir, 3 types of transparency or selflessness or nullification or sublimation, whatever word you want to use, even though all of them are due to their attachment, their dveikus, their cleaving and connection in their source, nevertheless, nevertheless, they're distinguished from one another. Because you would think, since it's dveikus in the source, that's it. No, he says, nevertheless, there are 3 different types, are all due to the fact that it's attached and connected, as opposed to yesh, but they're different from one another. The Eifana Aleph, type 1, Shoha Bitl Dehedet Tfisas Mokim, this bitl of lack of standing, we call the Hedet Tfisas Mokim, does not sense any of its own, it doesn't sense any value within itself. Hine habitl who this bitl, this nullification, who be spashtus v'leba mitziyusei. He's summing up things we learned earlier, page 159. This bitl is it's in its function, it's an extension and expression, not an existence. Like we said, the candle doesn't disappear in the light of the sun. The chacham does not disappear in presence of a greater chacham. What disappears is his expression. There's no hispashtus. He's not going to speak. He's not going to radiate. The light of the candle has no function in the presence of the sun. But the candle doesn't disappear. The mitzias is there. So it's only in the hispashtus. So yes, it's due to dveikus, meaning it's attached and therefore in the presence and aware of the source. But it does not, it's affecting its functionality, not its existence. Va'bitl be'efen ha'beis. So a summary, it's not the whole thing, but it's good to have the summary because Frierdiker Rebbe himself is summing it up. The bitl in type 2, the bitl in the second type, Shabitlu gam b'mitzias ha'er. There the bitl is also in the existence of the eir itself. V'hainu, what does it affect? Shekol mitziusu mitzad mekede. The eir senses that its entire existence is due to its source. The candle does not feel that its entire existence is due to the sun. Its function has no function in the light of the sun, in the presence of the sun. But here the eir is deeper, the bitl. It's a higher level. The second ephon, that its existence itself is dependent on its market. It's only due to its market. Im kain hariyeshne eza mitzias. So therefore there is a mitzias. You're not saying it doesn't exist. It exists. But it does not exist as an independent entity. Ki mitzad mekere. Only due to the source. The chacham, in the presence of a greater chacham, his function, he's not speaking, but when the other chacham leaves, he continues to function. He can go ahead and be a teacher and be a great chacham. Here, the eir, the mitzias of the eir is not a davar la'atzmei. Ki'im mitzad mekere. It's only due to its source, but it's a mitzias. Va'bitl be'efen ha'gimel. And the bitl, the transparency or the sublimation in the efen ha'gimel, type 3, the third type, who bitl b'mitzias the efes belade. That's a bitl b'mitzias. Its entire existence doesn't have any form of existence. Efes belade. Nothing, zilch, absolutely utter nothingness, bil adoi, without you. Meaning that all it is Atzmus expressing himself. So the focus is on Atzmus, not on the mitzias of Oir. It's not over yet. The Frierdiker Rebbe is now going to explain this at length. So this is, of course, a great gift because we don't have to rely on our own explanations. He's going to explain and ask, what does this mean exactly? So any question you have, hold up because the Frierdiker Rebbe is most likely going to ask and answer it. So we finished chapter 31. And as I said, from the lines I read earlier till the end, is all the Frierdiker Rebbe's addition. If any of you listening want to follow the text, I should mention, just go to ayinbeis.com and we have all the text scanned there, PDFs that you can access. Okay. So now he's going to ask a question. Omnom, chapter 32. Omnom, tzorech lahavim be'emek yeser. However, we need to understand, when you look at this with more depth, be'emek yeser, as we delve in this be'emek yeser deeper, much deeper, or more deeper, we have to understand, ha'hefresh ben habitl de'efen ha'gimel. What is the difference? The difference between type 3 bitl, shu habitl de'efes biladoi, the bitl of nothing, absolute, utter nothingness, biladoi, without him. The gam ima atzmus lo yesh rak bechinas atzmus. That even when atzmus is radiating this, all you have is atzmus and there's no mitzias of oir. Distinguishing that, lahabitl, comparing that, lahabitl be'efen habeis, the second level, second type of bitl, shu habitl de'ein zuloscha. That there's nothing besides you. There's nothing other than you, rather. There's nothing other than you. The kol mitziyusei rak mitzad mekere shu atzmus. Where there we said that it exists, but its entire existence is only due to its source, which is atzmus. What's the difference between the two? So I already offered some explanation based on what we've learned, but the Frierdiker Rebbe is asking it very directly now. The ma'achas sheshayich, the question still continues. The ma'achas sheshayich lema bitl, by the fact that you're saying it's possible to say bitl even on level 3, type 3, hari behechlish yesh eza mitzias, Dover, ma, shu bottle. You're calling level 3, type 3 bittel. You're not saying there's nothing there. You're saying it's oir, and this third type of bittel is such that the oir is only atzmus. So he's asking, since you say the word bittel, you have to say there's something there to be bottle. And then you're saying there's no mitzias, it's only atzmus. It seems like a contradiction of terms. And the Friedrich Rebbe, of course, is building this on Ayin Beis. He calls the third eifin bittel. He doesn't say, okay, we finished 2 levels of bittel, and now let's talk only about atzmus. That's not what he says. He says, eifin hagimel da bittel de oir. So you're saying this oir and this bittel. So he's saying bittel means there's something that has to be bottle. Something didn't exist, you don't say bittel. You don't say bittel on nothingness. So how do you explain this idea? Sheyesh mitzias shu ba'atzmus. I'm sorry. Eze mitzias eze dover ma shu bottle. The im loikein had the ene shayich lemer shu bottle. Because if not, if there's nothing there, it's not possible to say something is bottle when there's nothing there. The im loikein had the ene shayich lemer shu bottle. Had hu esa dover mamish. The im loikein had the ene shayich lemer shu bottle. The ima dovish shabatlu. I'll go back to this line in a minute. I want to finish the phrase. The ima dovish shabatlu eza mitzias, and if the thing that's bottle is some type of mitzias, rakshu atzmus hini b'man nechlek mitzias zu habotl mitzias ha'atzmus. Okay. So he's elaborating on the question, many different parts to it. So first thing is, you have to say there's a mitzias, because if not, you can't say the word bittel. Bittel is not applied to something that doesn't exist. So how do you say, therefore? So he's saying now, he continues. Because if you don't say so, you say there's no mitzias, then you can't say bittel. How do you eiseh davar mamish? Because there's no two things. So you can't say something is bottled to something else. It is the thing. If you say it doesn't exist, so you have only one entity to talk about, which is Asmus, as he explains. And if you say that this Davar Shabbatl is Mitzias, now we can't say there's nothing that exists because you can't say Bitl. Now it goes the other way around. If you're saying the thing that's Batl is some Mitzias, Rakshu Atzmus, but this Mitzias is Atzmus, so how do you explain how do you distinguish between the thing, the mitzias that's bottle and it's only atzmus, the mitzias atzmus shemitzius hanechlik bottle I love, from the thing, the mitzias that of atzmus that is separate from atzmus. In other words, if you're saying that there's no mitzias, there's no bittul, fine. If you say there's a mitzias of oir, but it's not a mitzias of oir, it's only atzmus, how do you distinguish between that atzmus, that oir is only atzmus, and atzmus itself, which is not a level of bittul, it's just atzmus itself. So what does that mean? That the kol mitzias ha'er hu ha'atzmus. So what's the difference between atzmus and this mitzias ha'er that is atzmus? That's exactly what he's asking. Which of course is the most obvious question that we all had from the beginning. What does this mean exactly? So again, him men nechlek mitzias zu ha'botl. How do you explain this mitzias of air that's bottled to atzmus and it's only atzmus? But mitzias ha'atzmus, shemitzias ha'nechlak, botle love. How do you distinguish between atzmus and the mitzias, which is different than it, which is bottled to it, and it's also only atzmus? Okay. V'hainu. He continues, and this means the acher heyesa er gili min ha'etzem, being the fact, once we know that er is a revelation from the core, from the essence, because that's what er is. Er is not atzmus; it's a revelation, a reflection from the etzem. Hainu shu chelik min ha'etzem, which means it's a part of the etzem because it's not a separate entity; it's a reflection of the etzem. I'm not sure if this is an answer or elaborating on the question. We'll see in a minute because he says v'hainu. But let's see. So So hine oz, move on, then we can understand bamel cholok ma'ifana beis. How it's distinguished from the second level, the second type. Lefi shahu ifana beis, because the second type, rak mashabo mesibas ha'etzem, besibas ha'etzem. In the second type, it's only it is only a sense of an effect, cause and effect. Siba mesubav. It's bo besibas ha'etzem, meaning that the second type is coming as a result of the etzem. Like we said, in the second type, senses that it can't exist without its source. Just like the sunlight cannot exist without the sun. The kol siba mesubav, and in every case of cause and effect, siba is a cause and mesubav is an effect. Harya mesubav b'tzad echad misyaches el siba. The mesubav, the effect, in mitzad echad, from one perspective, one facet, it relates to the cause. So when you see an effect of something that caused it, there's a relationship between the effect and the cause, because without it, the effect would not exist without the cause that causes it. But on the other hand, being that it's an effect, it's not the cause. It also is an existence of its own. So in any cause and effect, anything, let's say you have my hand pushes an object. I'm pushing this object. So the cause of this movement is my hand pushing it, that energy. So on one hand, it relates to my energy because without the energy, it wouldn't move. But on the other hand, there's something resulting from it. So as soon as you say cause and result or cause and effect, the effect is on one hand connected relates to the source, to the cause, and the second, it's a Metzias La'atzmei. This is referring to now the second type of bittul. The inyan habittul, so what's the bittul then? In Siba Mesubav in this case. In habittul hu mashem margish es sibase. The bittul consists of the fact that the effect feels the cause. You could have a situation where something happens and it does not feel and does not relate to a cause. Here in Siba Mesubav, the bittul is that the effect is fully aware that it would not happen were it not a cause. But when it happens, there's something there. You can't say nothing exists. V'im kein hari be'emes. So since the entire effect is a result of the cause, so therefore hari be'emes, in truth, hine kol mitziyusei hu asiba hamesabavei umeviesei. Therefore its entire existence, not the existence of the book, its movement, the entire existence in the mashal I just gave, the movement of it, its entire existence is the cause that causes it to be and brings it into reality. Maybe I say. It brings it into a Wirklichkeit, in Yiddish you would say, into reality. So if I throw a stone, the stone is not, I'm not creating the stone, but the flying stone right now is an effect from my energy. So on one hand, yes, something is happening, so it has a certain independence, but its entire reason it's flying is only due to my energy. So therefore, really, the effect, in truth, its true nature is that it's the cause. Take away the cause, there's no effect. That's what brings it into action. So that's how you explain Eifen 2, which means something exists, but that existence is completely dependent on and therefore aware that it's all it is a result of its cause. But when you say now in level 3, you're not saying it's a siba mesubav, that this is like sunlight and the sun. The sunlight is completely not the sun, but it's completely dependent on the sun. Remove the sun and there's no sunlight. But to say there's no sunlight at all, you don't say it doesn't exist. You say the sun gives off light. That light really is all about the sun, because without the sun, it doesn't exist. Now he's saying in level 3, we're saying deeper. He said the words before, I go back. Hu gili mina etzem. You're saying it's a chelik min etzem, meaning it's the etzem expressing himself. That's the meaning of level 3. So now he says, "Aval kasher ha'eru chelik min ha'atzmus." But this actually looks like he is answering it. It's interesting because he asked us a question, then he said, "V'hainu." Okay, from the question he went right into the answer. That's what it looks like. The line about 1 second. She says now like this. Okay, but it could be there's going to be back and forth, so we'll see. So he says now like this. Okay. Avol kasher ha'eru chelik min ha'atzmus. When you say eir, all it is a chelik min ha'atzmus. Just let's make this clear. It doesn't mean that atzmus is made up of parts. It means the eir is nothing but an extension of atzmus. It's not just a cause and effect. It's not just an effect from atzmus. It's a chelik min ha'atzmus. Says the zeu pirush. This is the meaning. Mashagami ma'atzmus lo yesh rak ha'atzmus. This is the meaning that even with atzmus, this level of eir is only atzmus. Aha. Let me correct myself. He's in the middle of the question still. It's the only thing is in the question, this is not uncommon by the Frierdiker Rebbe. In the question, he's explaining the inyan already, but then goes back to the question. So what we did here was that, so V'hainu, I correct myself. I thought V'hainu is the beginning of the answer. The truth is it's both. The Frierdiker Rebbe is interweaving question and answer. So just bear with it and you'll see how it soon develops. So he says like this. So he explains that we could explain the differences between the first level 3 and 2. This doesn't answer the question. He's just explaining the difference. Now, level 2 is cause and effect. And the effect is entirely a result, and its entire being is the cause. Because without the cause, it wouldn't be there. But there is an effect. In level 3, type 3, you're not talking about two things. You're talking about eir just being a reflection of atzmus. So that distinguishes. That's why you say there's nothing but atzmus, because it's not an effect of atzmus. It's atzmus expressing himself. When I throw a stone, there's a cause and effect. When I speak, it's not cause and effect. My speaking is a reflection of what I want to say, what's inside of me. You don't say dibur is an effect of the human being. It's an expression of you. So in that sense, since it's an expression, that's why you could say that you have only atzmus. But that only explains the difference between 2 and 3. He says, he goes back to the question, but even when you say this, it's not seemingly not understood. But now that you're saying that all it is an expression of atzmus, what distinguishes between this existent expression, habotel, this bit, remember we said that when you say bittul, even level 3 has to be mitzias. How do you distinguish between this mitzias, that all it is atzmus? From all of atzmus, that this chelik is bottled to it. So in other words, how do you explain that difference? So fine, we understand now that level 3 is only a chelik min atzmus, it's an expression of atzmus and that's it. How do you distinguish between this expression of atzmus, which is in the chelik, in the oir, that's bottled, to all of atzmus, that is bottled too? That's what he's asking. Does everyone understand the question? Or do you want me to explain it again or elaborate more? Now he's going to answer, Acha inyan hu. So that's the question. How do you explain the difference? So fine, we understand 3 and 2, 2 and 3, good. But the problem is, number 3, how do you explain this? Since all it is an expression of atzmus, what distinguishes it from atzmus? Which of course then explains why it's a third eifun habitl, because it's not atzmus mamish. It's oir, but the oir is completely devoid of any identity. And now he's going to explain what that means. He says, Acha inyan hu. The answer, however, the Acha inyan, the answer to this is Kihin his barley ill. Because we explained earlier in the Maimer, B'da ki chelik Hashem. Ki chelik havayam. This goes back a while back. Let me refer to you what page it is. It was the Shabbos Shuvah Maimer. chelik havaya. I mean, wow, yeah. So the Chemaim is back on page 24, but the Indian that he's citing now, if you remember, is on page, where is it? Yeah, page 31. Page 31, if you may remember, I'll just remind you what he said there. He's spoken there about the difference in Gashmius and Ruchnius, where he said that Gashmius, Mitziyusei, is not Mitzad Atzmei, because Gashmius is created by God. And Kiyume, its perpetuation is also not Mitzad Atzmei. Its value is also, it doesn't have any value. In Ruchnius, he said, Mitziyusei is not Mitzad Atzmei, because it's also created by God, but it's Kiyum. It has some inherent value that's Mitzad Atzmei. So to explain that, the Frierdiker Rebbe said, the Hine Oyer hu Ruchni v'yesh bei Gimel Inyanim, Mitziyus Kiyum v'Gili. So he's now referring back to that page 31 in explaining this answer to this question. What does it mean that there is a Mitziyus of Oyer that's bottle, but there's no Mitziyus because Koli Atzmos. What does that mean? So he says, every reflection, every reflection or expression of Oyer has three things in it: Mitzias, Kiyum, Vigili. Its existence, its perpetuation or its sustenance, and Gilui, its revelation. So you may recall that on page, that was, I said, page 31. On page 32, he explained it briefly. Just want to see it a moment before we continue. 1 second. So there he said, the Mitzias of Oyer is the very fact that God chose that there should be an existence of something that is expressing, reflecting, revealing. I mentioned Oyer as being awareness. Atzmus on its own, the concept of awareness does not exist. The concept of Gili, nothing exists. Atzmus is Atzmus, beyond definition, beyond terms. But Atzmus wanted to create an existence like ours, where there is expression, there's concealment, there's revelation, there's awareness, there's lack of awareness. The Yesh doesn't have awareness. The Er is awareness. That's the world God wanted. We don't know why. Nesava Kodesh Baruch. So once he created the Mitzias of Gili, of Er, then there's something about Er that has a Kiyum Atzmi. That's what we learned. What's a Kiyum Atzmi? Because Kol Inyani Shel Er is Bittul. Bittul has a truth of its own. Like I said from that I heard from the name of the Rebbe, Bittul Kenish Bottle then. So in a sense, even though Er does not have any existence of its own without the source, but when Er does not have to exist, it's only because God wants it to exist, the Mitzias. But once it exists, it's Kulei Emes, because all it's telling you is I have a source. What about it is not true. So the very existence of Er, its very existence, its very kiyum rather, its value is all about Elokus. Its Mitzias did not have to exist. But once it exists, all it's telling you is that there's a God. So that's its kiyum. And that kiyum is there whether it's begili or not begili. And then gilui is when the actually is revealed, when that truth is revealed. That's what he said basically back there. Page 31 and 32. And that's where he said that the Mitzias of Oyer obviously is not on its own, the Konsham Atzmus. But the Kiyum of Oyer has in it something that is reflecting its source, which is a truth. That, for example, Yesh does not have. The Yesh does not reflect its source without our Avodah and work. So now he's going to use this to explain where we are right now in the levels of the levels of Bittul. So he says like this. Actually, these three are going to be the three types of Bittul. Mitzias, Kiyum, and Gili. So he says like this now. The Mitzias who are Oir Kameshahu. Kameshahu Kol Adaim Ba'amoyer. When you say Mitzias of Oir, you don't mean Mitzias as an existence. You mean the mere fact that there's such a thing called Oir. So he says that refers to the Oir, the way it's encompassed in the Moir, in the source. In other words, God chose that I want to express myself. That's Mitzias Oir. Not the actual expression necessarily. It's the Mitzias that now something in Atzmos chose to create the concept of awareness or gili or Oir, right. And from this Mitzias will then come the Kiyum and the Gili, which we'll explain a little later. He's going to explain a little later what that means. Because now goes into a newer subject, I think we'll stop here. And what he's going to basically explain that there's 3 levels in Oir. There's 3 levels in Oir. And we learned this actually in Ayin Beis in a few places. Actually, 3 levels of Oir. In chapter 29 in Ayin Beis and on, he explained it. He also explained it in later in when he spoke about Dvarim Ayin Daled. What page is that? Let me see a second. Dvarim. Siyum b'mishpat tepada maimer. I can give you actually the chapter numbers. I wrote it down. Chapter 87, 99, and 333. All in volume 1. I'm sorry. No. My mistake. No. My mistake. No. That's something else. In chapter 29 and on, and chapter 279 and on. That's the Maimer of Dvarim. So there he explained that there are 3 levels in Oir. Oir as it's encompassed in the source, Oir as it's outside of the source, but it's still not in Kalim, and Oir as it manifests in the containers. He's going to explain how these 3 levels correspond to the 3 types. And once you understand that, we'll understand how the Mitzias of Oir, as it's encompassed in the source, is not about the Oir, but it's about the source. And that's why it's called Atzmus. And that distinguishes it from all of Atzmus, so to speak. Because it's only Atzmus as Atzmus is manifesting in Gilui. So we did discuss this already. Not going to be any major surprises, but it's going to be much more spelled out and many details. And maybe it will be some surprises for some of us. So we'll stop here. I'm at the bottom of page 161.